Okay, good afternoon. My name is Dan Flatley. I'm a national security reporter at Bloomberg focused on economic issues. And it is about 3:57 in the afternoon. This is usually a time my teachers would tell me to stand up and do stretches and jumping jacks and things to sort of get the energy back. But we have a great panel for you this afternoon. I want to introduce a few folks who are going to talk about cybersecurity, critical infrastructure, defense innovation, a whole host of topics that we're going to try to keep focused both on their impact on geoeconomics, but also on security. So Carole House is Special Advisor for Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Policy at the White House National Security Council. Dave Levy is Vice President at Amazon Web Services. And Sven Weisenegger is head of the Cyber Innovation Hub at the German Armed Forces. And he told me that it is close to Schwarzenegger and that you can think of him that way if you want.
Sorry. Yeah, disappointed, I know.
So we're very fortunate this afternoon to have a breadth of experience and expertise here on stage from government and critical infrastructure to the private sector to the military and security. All of these things are related but somewhat different and distinct in the challenges and the opportunities that they present. And so to kind of kick us off and sort of get us the conversation started, I'd like to present a scenario for us to discuss. And by way of introduction, ask you to respond to this idea. So, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. On the eastern seaboard, there are rolling blackouts. Same thing in parts of Europe. We're not sure whether there's a military kinetic operation that's going to follow this, or if this is a ransomware attack. What's your first move? Who's your first call? And do you think that you're prepared for that scenario, Carole?
Great. Love starting with a war game. And we did not know this beforehand. So brilliant question, Daniel. I'd say first off, if it's 6 o'clock, we're already sitting in our offices in the skiff. So hopefully that's good news. That means that we're actually getting the alert live and while we're sitting at our desks versus some other incidents that where we get notice of at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then we just get those calls to wake us up. But I'd say for us, first, we would end up triggering some of our own alerts throughout the interagency to try to figure out what's going on, including working through state and the critical agencies that also have their own international counterparts, like the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, certainly through law enforcement. Something like this that looks like it would probably, the instinct would be that it would be deliberate probably, so that would trigger certainly law enforcement, but also some DoD and other capabilities across the intelligence community to try to figure out who it was, what happened, but then especially trying to work through the sectors that were hit. So in this case, the energy sector, the Sector Risk Management Agency is Department of Energy for that sector, and trying to work through, okay, what are the measures that we need to put in place to create the operational resilience, make sure that energy, which is one of those critical kind of lifeline sectors that every other sector relies upon. So trying to get that back up as much as possible and see what measures that we need to put in place. So I think there are lots of different national security levers that start getting pulled on things like attribution, like evaluating options that are available if we determine that it was a malicious actor, and determining what we need to do diplomatically or using some of our other offensive capabilities.
So it sounds like you're prepared.
Yes, sorry.
Dave?
Well, notwithstanding all the things that could occur in an event like that, I think my family would be very upset about the 5 to 8 packages every morning they get from Amazon that in my own house that they probably wouldn't get. But no, I would say, very similar to Carole. I mean, first of all, we'd already be up. We'd probably been awake many hours ago. We run a global infrastructure around the world that is 24/7, 365 infrastructure. Everything from retail operations to no-fail, high-value assets and resiliency. And so we have a critical incident response framework. We have alerts and alarms, and so we would have already been diagnosing and would have activated contingency plans, whether that's from a network availability or points of presence standpoint. And so those sorts of things, and we plan for those sorts of events actively all the time. We're also thinking about the scale of those potential events to come in the future, and not only our own infrastructure, but everything that our infrastructure touches as well too. All of our partners around the world, all of our customers around the world too. And so I do believe we would be ready for that level of event. I don't think we'd be ready for not getting our packages, but it'd be some very upset people. But we are very well, I think, organized and prepared, and we have the right kind of partnerships. I think whether that's with our government customers, with our financial institution customers, just we have the right kind of partnership that I think those conversations would be happening earlier in the morning, as soon as that first alert went off.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Would you be talking to Carole in the White House?
Yeah, likely, or somebody in the first team. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Critical infrastructure.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so Dave's prepared. Carole's prepared. Sven.
I would call my generals. No, kidding. So I know that armed forces are well trained for many scenarios. So therefore, I would trust my soldiers, and we are capable to run many operations independently, and we don't rely always on public infrastructure. So that's a big advantage of armed forces. So this is what I would do. And secondly, I would probably call the Cyber Command and ask for situational awareness, and then make decisions based on that. I think this is the key success factor, and not to be too fast maybe, and oversee what's going on right now, talking to partners, NATO members, and then decide maybe even together what's to tackle next.
So I wanted to follow up with you, Sven, because you do something that's slightly different from, everybody on this stage does something that's slightly different from the next person, but Sven, you have a very unique role with the German Armed Forces. You're head of the Cyber Innovation Hub, which may be a little bit of a misnomer in terms of you don't do cyber per se, but you do a whole host of different things. So, my understanding is you're bringing in investments, you're looking at what the soldiers need on the ground, you're trying to push out the technology to them. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've learned over the last 2 years from the fighting in Ukraine? That's the pace of change there, and the pace of technology there is moving very quickly. What are you learning from the battlefield? What are you taking back to the Cyber Innovation Hub, and how are you pushing that out to your soldiers on the front line?
So I think the most important thing is that what we have learned and experienced in the past 7 years is, besides the Ukraine topic, is that you always need to talk to the soldiers, because they are the people using your tools and the hardware and the software. So thinking about doing innovation based on PowerPoint and sitting in the office does not work at all. So first of all. Second, agility and speed is the most relevant thing ever. Don't plan too much experience on the battlefield and then go back to the organization and then scale up. So usually we tend to scale up first. So we do planning, and then we scale up. Then we realize at the end, no one is really interested in this innovation. So therefore, our approach is completely different. It's a bottom-up approach, talking to the soldiers. In my department, I have also active soldiers and reservists, because they really know what to tackle first. So, and I think this is a key success factor. The second important factor is the so-called software-defined approach, shifting from hardware-based innovation or platform-based innovation to a more software approach, because developing software is much faster and easier than developing new hardware on the battlefield. And this is, I think, the key learning from Ukraine, using sensor-to-shooter technologies or approaches like Starlink, drones, and then telling the artillery to fire on the exact position. I think this was one of the game changers in the very beginning of the war.
There's a whole host of issues to follow up on there, but I'm just very curious. Have you ever had a soldier in the field tell you, Sven, this is just not working?
Yes, all the time.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely fine, to be very honest. So making mistakes, I think, is very important to learn. And therefore, talking to them every day and making them part of the problem and the solution is very important. So the key learning is you always need a committed user. If the soldier is not committed to help you, it does not work. You can't tell them do this and do that. So they have to be very committed. They have to be in love with the problem. I know it sounds a little bit strange, but I think that's very helpful if you have a very committed user to drive the innovation. Because they do this part-time, by the way. It's not their original job to work with us. So therefore, they put a lot of effort working with us together on solving their daily problem.
So, you know, this makes me think, Dave, about our conversation about workforce that we had the other day. And if you're expecting a cybersecurity panel to be a lot of ones and zeros and technical stuff, you know, we're talking a lot about personnel because those are the people that have to implement these innovations. And so, you know, one of the things that we talked about was the fact that, you know, the engineering department, the IT folks, you know, they're well versed on these issues, but the pace of change is so fast that it's even hard sometimes for them to keep up. What about, you know, the frontline workers or the people who really need to use this stuff on a day-to-day basis? How are you thinking about, at Amazon Web Services and the customers and clients that you work with, about pushing all of this kind of innovation down to, you know, to the most common denominator or the, you know, the person that needs to use it?
Yeah, it's a great point. The conversation we were having the other day was we had a customer who was, you know, largely had already moved a lot of their infrastructure into the cloud, and you know, they'd done a big modernization effort. They'd spent an enormous amount of resource time doing this. They had trained a lot of their technical team on these newer technologies, and much to Sven's point, like, speed, and you know, we have a saying inside of Amazon, like, speed is not preordained. Like, it's something you have to work at. It's something that has to be part of the culture of your organization, and it matters. It matters almost disproportionately so in you know, in a business context, in I would imagine a military context as well too. And so it was interesting because what we noticed about this customer is they'd signed up for a lot of this free basic 101 cloud training, and we thought, that's really odd. They've been doing this for 7 or 8 years. They've moved all of these sophisticated applications and systems in the cloud. Why are they signing up for hundreds or thousands of basic services, basic training services? And what it was is they were training everybody else on all their non-technical staff. They were training everybody and starting to build competencies around what is cloud, what are these emerging technologies, how to leverage them, how should I think about them in my use case or my paradigm, and start working with the technology organization to do that, because those decisions matter. The ability to invent or create really matters, and then to have the agility built into the system. So I actually thought it was really remarkable from this customer and this organization that they were thinking in this way, that they were going to create this kind of, the goal was to create this institutional agility. I'll add one thing to that, which is during the pandemic we had a customer who, if you can imagine, there was a lot of you know, fast food delivery. You can imagine that fast food type customer. And so if you think about how many of those types of businesses weren't necessarily prepared to deliver and maintain their business in that environment. They weren't set up to deliver at home to customers or to remote locations. It just wasn't their business model. And so it was really stressful for some of those organizations in the early days. And so, you know, basic things like, how do I get in touch with customers? How do I interact with them in this kind of new paradigm? And so we worked with a lot of those customers to set up an infrastructure where they could start doing that. But you can imagine they don't want to be unprepared for that the next time. You don't want to be in that situation and not have agility and not have your workforce ready to respond to whatever's coming next. And so I think it's incredibly important on the skilling and upskilling side across the board, not just the technical teams.
So could I ask you, Dave, about where cybersecurity enters into that? Because, you know, one of the things that we've reported on at Bloomberg is social engineering, you know, targeting specific employees with an email from their boss saying, please respond now. And so you act before you really think, you know, because that kind of triggers that fight or flight response. So when it comes to cybersecurity, and how are you educating, folks who may not be working with the more sophisticated end of cyber technology or digital technology about cybersecurity threats, and how is that part of the conversation, and how important is that, especially in this day and age where we're seeing a lot of those types of attacks?
What I heard in that question is that I don't have to respond to my boss right now. So that's,
yes, actually, that is a blanket edict for everyone in the room. Don't
if
respond
I don't
to any
take
emails from
anything
your
else
bosses.
away from this discussion, I can go. No, look, we have like a company level, board level commitment to train 29 million people on these cloud technologies by 2025. We've already hit that goal. So I think it's incredibly important to have everyone in an organization aware. Even at a company like ours, so this is our business. Security is like job zero for everybody. It doesn't matter what the role is, and so it's really critical that everyone in the organization gets some level of training. And the threats are evolving and changing really quickly. So it's not just train once and teach someone what a email phishing scam is, and you never have to do it again. It's a continuous and an adaptive process that we've got to do. And so we provide that for our own employees. We provide it for our customers and our partners, and anybody who's willing to take it on board, we encourage it.
Is it okay? I
please.
just am inspired by some of the comments that you both have just made, and I feel like there's this common like beating heart in the story of evolution that both of you were speaking about, which is really the decentralization and distribution of knowledge and skill sets, as well as democratized access to highly sophisticated technologies. I remember when the continued war of aggression against Ukraine was going on, and I remember reading stories about people like building drones in their garages, and like that this was the citizenry rising up to try to answer the call for the need to create these emerging technologies. Certainly we have this story in cybersecurity where all of us have had the honor and privilege of cybersecurity awareness training, and now and then you mentioned the threat story, also now democratized access to incredibly sophisticated technologies like artificial intelligence, which present wonderful economic potential that was examined very thoroughly earlier, but also from a cybersecurity and former chemical officer in the Army's perspective, is very scary when that democratized access to good guys also means democratized access to bad guys. So that means like malicious actors getting access to highly sophisticated ability to conduct human-level capacity command and control for malicious cyber operations, or chem, bio, rad, nuclear design capability that has been out of reach of certain rogue nations, and now is a potential threat with the democratized access to this technology. So I just wanted to highlight that I was seeing this common theme about the evolution and adaptability for good and bad purposes, and that I think decentralization is a big part of that story.
Yeah, and Carole, I was going to ask you about ransomware, because I know that was, that's something that you've been working on a lot, and it does seem to continue to be an issue. So, what sort of trends are you seeing in that space, and how are you preparing for those types of attacks at the White House and in government? But also, what are you telling your colleagues in the private sector?
I appreciate that, and I think ransomware also lets me continue to hit on the decentralization piece, given that decentralized money, like cryptocurrency, and also non-state actors, but actors operating inside of permissive environments and nations are a big part of the ransomware story. But when I was on my first tour at the National Security Council at the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, we were standing up the counter-ransomware campaign, and I'm sure a lot of people here might recall Colonial Pipeline. That happened within the first 6 weeks of me showing up, so a fun trial by fire situation. But we were standing up these efforts, and while there are some that viewed ransomware, and some still do, as kind of a buzzword, because they're like, oh, it's just one of many types of cybercrimes, and I would say that that's not the case, because even where business email compromise fraud or other types of phishing scams certainly matter absolutely to us, ransomware rises to the level of national security threat because of its disruptive nature, that it is taking down pipelines, it is taking down hospitals, it's targeting of critical infrastructure, and specifically looking for those sectors that either have poor cybersecurity and or are high value targets because of the ease of which to compromise them for poor cybersecurity measures, or the attractiveness of being able to extort that payment because of the critical services that, that people and the companies rely upon, make ransomware look like a very low risk, high reward mechanism that even has arisen now, these ransomware as a service economies. We've all heard of software as a service and infrastructure as a service. Ransomware as a service is how these criminal ecosystems have evolved, where you have crime groups that are specializing in HR and negotiation and creating the exploit kits and actually going and doing the recon on other people's networks and deploying it. These are really sophisticated economies, and that have also been enabled in part because of the poor compliance internationally for cryptocurrency on anti-money laundering frameworks. So all of those are critical efforts that the National Security Council is working with the interagency to drive. I know Lisa Monaco spoke to some of the actions that we've taken related to some of these malicious actors and facilitators, but ransomware it's a huge concern for us, and it continues to target and disrupt critical infrastructure.
So this would not be a true cybersecurity panel if we didn't talk about artificial intelligence. So, you know, there's a lot of promise, obviously, with artificial intelligence. There's privacy concerns, potentially. I was just looking at a poll where a majority of Americans are concerned about how their data would be used when it comes to artificial intelligence. There's been fights over copyrights. There's a number of things to talk about. But you know, no one in the world at this point seems to be able to agree on much. You know, we're having, you know, we have conflicts around the world, obviously. We have the UN General Assembly this week. There's been lots of arguments about various issues. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, what are the prospects for global rules of the road and global regulations? Are you optimistic at all about a potential for that? Sven, you're shaking your head, so of course I'm going to go with you. Unless you're saying, please don't ask me this question.
I mean, I have a different perspective because I run a different business, so therefore it's all about having an advantage because you have an opponent at the other side. Therefore probably the opponent, like Russia or China, they will probably not stick to these rules, even if they apply to these rules on the UN level. So therefore I think that's a different game in my scenario. But yeah. AI, I think, is very powerful and very important because the amount of data, the amount of sensors that we have, even your mobile phone is a sensor. In Ukraine, every phone is a sensor because you can upload pictures for getting a better situational awareness of the current ground, what we also tested, by the way, on a technical level, not on an ethical level or a legal level, but ensuring the capability that we can provide in times of crisis or war. This tool is very important in terms of innovation. So therefore AI is a must because the data we can't process by humans is not possible. So therefore AI is, I think, the key driver, and quantum computing and quantum sensors as well. Just a few buzzwords, I know. But I think these will be the main drivers for armed forces in the future.
Interesting. Dave?
Yeah, you know, artificial intelligence has been around a long time. We've been doing artificial intelligence side at Amazon for, you know, I mean, more than 20 years, and it's provided an enormous amount of benefits and innovation to the company, and will continue to do so. And you know, now we've had, I said I would get through this conference without saying generative AI, but you know, now generative AI, I think, also holds that promise. You know, if we look out, we see that technologies like those are really going to, you know, they're going to reinvent every customer experience that we know today in the fullness of time. You know, in my portfolio, which is my portfolio for the company, is really governments and healthcare and all the fun stuff. So you know, my team and I are in the middle of this. You know, how are we going to regulate this, but also strike a balance between providing, democratizing access to these very, very powerful technologies that can do that can really change the productivity profile of a country, could change the productivity profile of an organization, and making sure that regulation doesn't inhibit that.
Okay.
We actively work with countries around the world on what does governance look like, what does responsible AI look like, and we think that there are so many opportunities that countries and our customers are going to have to leverage these technologies. Not the least of which, as Swin said, there are places around the world who are not going to have the same point of view on regulation, even if they say they do. And so we want to make sure that we strike a balance between regulation and safety and privacy. And I think we're trying to design a way and a system that allows all of those things to happen, where you can have fine-grained controls around how you want to govern your approach to artificial intelligence, but at the same time get at all of the advantages and the innovation and the agility and speed and that it would bring.
Carole?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add off of those brilliant points, just that I really liked Dilip characterizing wanting positive economic statecraft being part of the arsenal for democracies, and I think that getting, I think that, I think that that's critical for us to make sure that democratic principles are inherently built in, are inherently built into AI because of the same issues that you highlighted that are inherently going to come up around privacy and civil liberty, that the same models that you use for things like emergency response could, if used the wrong and implemented the wrong way, could become also the tools for undesirable and unlawful state suppression and surveillance. So those kinds of principles needing to be built in is critical, and I think that especially like with our transatlantic partners and other democracies, we have a great opportunity and a way forward. There are certainly nations that feel fundamentally differently about human rights and civil liberties. So I think that it will be hard. It will be a hard-fought issue to try to get to a common view and mindset about what ethical and responsible use of AI is.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you all took the discussion in a different direction, but I think it's a more interesting direction, which is it sounds like there is a race to get to sort of the best possible form of artificial intelligence, or the best tech. There's obviously a race on for quantum computing, and there's a race on for all sorts of different types of technology that will give us, in the transatlantic world, an advantage over our adversaries potentially. Does this risk kind of getting out of control and becoming sort of an arms race in a sense, or do you think that there is some way to avoid that outcome? Dave?
Well,
you're looking at me like you want to answer that.
Yeah,
question.
I mean, I don't want to comment on those sorts of things, but what I will tell you is, like, from our perspective, a lot of the talk, a lot of the discussion, a lot of the interest and activity that we've seen over the last couple of years has really been at the application layer. So there's a lot of, applications that now you can go and, put something into a prompt and get something out, and those have been kind of dominating the conversation. I do think as organizations, as governments, big enterprises start to meaningfully adopt these technologies, I do think there's going to be a way to architect systems that take into account all of these things, that take into account security and privacy, that take into account models that are set up for, one sort of thing versus another, even securing an organization's own data to use for these sorts of things, and delivering, model outputs that are, productive, that are not harmful. So I do think there's going to be a day to do that, and I do think that organizations are racing to figure that out. Much to Sven's point, in the business paradigm, there are businesses racing to figure that out because there is an opportunity that they want to take advantage of in a given market or somewhere. And so in that sense, I do think there's a race. I would stop short, my purview is not national security matters or arms races, but But I do think that day is coming, or it's here,
Right.
where organizations are doing that.
Well, you bring up we only have a few minutes left, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But, Dave, you bring up an interesting point, which is the partnership between the government and the private sector, which is the one, if it's pace of change and that is kind of the unifying thread here. So, Carole, just to go back to you, you sit in the White House. Who are you talking to? What are you talking about in the private sector? And what are the top issues of mind that you think that the private sector and the government can work on together in this area?
Great. A critical issue for us is about critical infrastructure defense and resilience. Resilience being that place where the cyber meets the physical, and us needing to make sure that in the instance of a cyber failure, that we can continue operationally and physically being able to operate and provide those critical goods and services. And this is especially of concern to us in the wake of Volt Typhoon, is what the US government sort of calls and characterizes this new transition of Chinese malicious cyber operations, kind of moving from a focus on intellectual property theft, but instead to pre-positioning on US critical infrastructure for a potential future disruptive impact on our critical infrastructure in the wake of a potential conflict or other scenario. This issue is of massive concern to us. Working with our critical infrastructure authorities are very fragmented on the regulatory side, and then even where sectors are regulated, compliance and implementation is a whole other story. So that partnership with industry, with our 16 critical infrastructure sectors, whether it's water, transportation, communications, energy, the financial sector, these are all critical sectors that we engage with. The information and communications technology sector that everyone really tends to rely upon, IT and energy often end up at the heart of all those. But our ability to work with them, some of working with them is through regulating them and enforcing and putting in place critical cybersecurity requirements. It's also working to make sure that operational resilience is something that is accounted for and that's built in. I don't know if anyone here was ever stationed in the Indo-PACOM or Indo-Pacific area, but I was in the Army, and we were taught no more task force Smiths, which was this story of basically making sure that we have the right operational readiness to not have this story that Army officers often learn about a particular failure of readiness at the beginning of the Korean War. Why am I talking about the Korean War? It was the last time that we were in open conflict with Chinese troops. As well, obviously it was North Korean, they were just backed by Soviets and Chinese also, and thinking about something like Volt Typhoon and the potential of an armed conflict with Taiwan, I don't want the absence of cybersecurity and readiness and partnership with industry for that to be the future task force Smith. I don't want that to be studied 70 years after any potential conflict and looked at as this example of a failure of us to account for the need for building in the necessary operational readiness.
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know how much time we have, but I do believe that we're in a place where organizations need to move pretty quickly on these sorts of things to be ready for the future that's in front of them. And there's certainly a lot of conflicts around the world, and the world is a very dynamic place. And our perspective is that we want to provide infrastructure that is accessible to those organizations so that they can be prepared for that, and they can invent, and that they've got workforces that are able to go out and build things that are needed for their organization.
Sven, any last thoughts?
So the innovative dilemma is bringing innovation into scale.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think there's a reason for that. And this is very important to understand, is that the processes that we have are processes from times of peace. And I think this is the biggest problem in terms of mind change of people, because we have to adapt to crisis mode, and this is a completely different game. And there are some people, plenty of people, they are old enough, but still they don't understand that we are moving into a wrong direction. So therefore speeding up is the key factor. And if they don't follow, probably we have to apply some strict rules on them, because otherwise we will have a problem in 5 to 8 years. Because then Russians probably able to harm Europe even more.
Well, that seems like a good place to leave it. Thank you very much, Carole, Dave, Sven, our wonderful audience, and that's it.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.